To order. First, we'll do a roll call, and I guess that's really introducing ourselves, so maybe you could start, Bob.
I'm Bob Freshman.
Jake Jendusa.
Dennis Wiley.
Sarah Downing.
Sukheenai.
And in the audience,
Jason Fields, board member.
I'm Alan Holstein, former Trail Committee member.
very good, thank you. Hopefully, everyone had a chance to see the minutes that Sarah sent out in the packet.
There's some up there if they needed to, and then
There's some up here too as well. Okay. Hi, Matt. Any changes to the minutes? Any additions? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Yeah, I move to approve.
Moves to approve the minutes. Do I have a second? Bob seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. So the minutes are approved. And then we sent out the agenda for, there's Lauren.
I'm sorry. Apologies for being late.
Not a problem. You see the agenda that was also sent out, and if anyone needs one, they're at the front of the room. Does anyone have any additions or changes to the agenda?
Thank you.
I do. If we have time, if time allows, if we're not going to go over 7 p.m., can we ask a few questions about the master plan for Bob and Riley and the status
Yes.
of that?
Okay.
Bob and Crystal Riley? Thank you.
All right, well, we're going to move on. Alan Holstein was at our meeting, our previous meeting, and we asked if Alan could give us a kind of some overview of what was done in the past with the committee. They worked for a number of years and seems like had a lot of accomplishments. And we were trying to figure out, well, what are we going to do as a committee? So we thought a good idea would be to have some sort of input from the old committee. And Alan agreed to be able to do that for us. So Alan, you're on.
Thank you. So yeah, my goal is just to sort of inform you of the past, present, and future. What
So we can't hear you very well.
That's a good one.
I can sit up here.
You want to come up here? Okay.
Like the good old days.
There you go.
Am I on?
Yes.
Yes.
So yeah, my goal was to inform this current committee of the past, present, and future. I was the sole committee member of the last group to apply for membership in this group and was not accepted. Put that aside. But that's my goal, is to help you build on what we did. And so I think the inception was the brainchild of Don Clements, the departing superintendent, and was kind of in the shadow of a pool committee that lobbied heavily and very successfully in favor of a bond measure to rebuild the pool. And they were very successful. And I sort of came into it thinking that was our goal, but we didn't have a specific project to lobby for. And we sort of fumbled a little bit trying to figure out what our mission was. And along the way, we had a turnover in our chair of our committee, and there was a turnover in the board. So we had trouble finding traction. But up pops up the Wiley Park that I think the previous board had commissioned a strategic plan for. And there was a series of community meetings around that, where the bicycling community and the equestrian community showed up. I mean, we filled up the cultural center. It became quite controversial. There was a disproportionate group from the equestrian community that lobbied heavily against allowing bicycles at the Riley Park. Independently, our committee went up there. We had a field trip up there, and we went and looked. I don't know if you've been up there, but there's a road that splits the park in half, and it was our recommendation that the board split the park in half and have the west half dedicated to equestrian and the eastern half dedicated to pedestrian and bicyclists. There was parking at each of the areas, and that was our recommendation. The board didn't accept that. In fact, they recommended and approved a prohibition of bicyclists up there against our recommendations, and it kind of led us to wonder, okay, what are we doing here? If we're going to make recommendations and the board's not going to accept them, what are we doing here? But that was the conclusion. But as I said, there was a number of community meetings where there was, we filled the room. It was surprising how the outpouring of NIMBYism from the equestrian community, and I'll come back to that point. So what were our accomplishments? Well, it was Matt Dolphin, who may be listening in, was a member of the previous committee and very active in trails, organized a cleanup effort that had 80 people turn out. And so that was a way of raising awareness at the same time of accomplishing something physical at the park. As I said, we had a turnover in the leadership of the committee, and the second chair, Quentin, I forget his last name, is a young guy who has an educational background in recreation. He commissioned a survey that was professionally done and guided by the faculty at Oregon State of the community about who supported trails. It was, you know, I don't know, 20 or 30 questions sent out randomly to the community, and everyone supported trails. That was presented to the board, and not sure what they did with that. So that's past and present. What about the future? Riley, I think, is something that you ought to make a priority. Signage is something that's current. It's a big park, and as it is, there's trails, and when you come to a fork in the trail, you don't know where you're going or how long that trail is going to be. Never mind if it's for bicycles or horses. Signage is really important there, and I think that's an effort that's underway. But that's something to keep on top of. When the board made the decision not to allow bicycles at Riley Park, they said, oh, we'll just find another piece of land for a bike trail, but nothing's been mentioned ever since. I don't think. But there was a sizable group of people using that park as a bicycling recreation opportunity, and so far no alternative, to my knowledge, has been recognized. A bypass trail is in the works, but I think that has a life of its own, and I wouldn't get too invested in that. Stay aware of it. But I think it has funding, and the staff here is working on it, and I wouldn't go down that rabbit hole very much based on what I know. The Ewing Young Park is something I would keep high on the list. It was, the idea was to build a bridge across Chehalem Creek and expand the park for hiking. But there was a zoning problem with it, and they decided to drop it for half a year or a year and get it rezoned at the county level to be a park instead of in city limits. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, but I think that's waiting to get rezoned, at which time they could build a bridge and build new trails. And I would keep that sort of on the middle part of the list as a priority. So I think that's it. I think Riley Park is one of the priorities, Ewing Young, and identifying a different piece of land for bikes. One of my criticisms or observations about Riley and the prohibition of bikes there, the board can sit down here and say, make a rule and say no bikes allowed, but there's no way to enforce it. And my vision was to have volunteers up there saying, okay, high usage time, saying bikes over there, horses over there. Not perfect. You can't have volunteers up there 24/7. But that's better than making a rule that you can't enforce. And so to my mind, that's still in play. And so that's the future for me. That's it.
Alan, so you said there's been some turnover in the committee. How big was your committee on average?
We started off much bigger than yours, maybe 12 to 14, and some didn't participate very much. I don't have a good answer for what's the right number.
I was wondering, Matt, or maybe Jason, why is it 7 now when the committee used to be maybe twice as large?
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the ad hoc committees went through a lot of changes over the last few years. Originally, they weren't regulated by the public meetings laws as they are now. That was a legal change, I think, that took effect, I want to say, in 2024. It could have been 2023. So that's what caused a little more stringent requirements for the meetings to be done in standard public fashion and online access as well, as obviously we're doing now. And we also ended up passing committee rules, which is really standard for any sort of a district or government to have specific rules to committees, what their focus should be on, what they can and can't do. And in doing that, the board agreed that committees should be about 5 to 7 people on the committee. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, but primarily what happens is if you have a larger committee, you end up with, as Alan was indicating, a number of people that won't be particularly involved. And you end up with a core of 5 to 7 people typically that end up being the primary committee goers. You also end up with kind of a secondary level of volunteers, which you'll see especially in this committee as you guys start working on work days, trail days, any kind of volunteer group efforts. You'll probably find that you'll have maybe 20 or 30 people, but you'll still end up with 5 or 7 people that round out the committee. So I'm sure there was more to it than just those things, but that's what comes to mind from the board discussion.
Are there other questions for Alan?
I always have questions, and maybe Matt or Alan can answer. Can you elaborate more when you said that the previous committee trying to separate, the west for the equestrians and the east, and it didn't approve? Is it because of the proportional is not fair, or why? What is your original thought? Yeah.
I will jump in here just
Yeah.
to provide a little bit of background. This was a a very heavily debated issue that the board dealt with over the course of the last, I'd say, almost 3 years. And then the board made a policy decision. So the committee's role isn't to rehash the policies or debate the policies that the board makes, but then to just move forward instead with recommendations as to what improvements can be made to the overall trail system or provide other recommendations. So the bike equestrian issue, in my opinion, wouldn't be a discussion that really makes sense for us to have at the trail committee setting. But things like signage, trail improvements, all the other things for hiking, equestrian, and so forth, I think would be good uses of time, if that makes sense.
I'm going to jump in here. This is Jason. So this board is committed to finding a place for youngsters, for families to take their kids and be able to ride their bicycles. We believed that we had located a specific piece of property, and it just hasn't materialized yet. There are some hurdles that we're trying to get through before we actually make the plunge to purchase. So at this moment, we haven't decided that is something that we're willing to do because there are some issues with the property. And then we also have got the campground property. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that is another piece of property that could potentially be an area where you're going to have hills and what have you to ride your bikes.
Which property was that?
It's a campground property. It's about 90 acres, and it's right here off 219. The issue with that property, there is no safe entrance to get on that property. So those are things. But I just want you guys to know this is not it's not about bicycles. This is about we do want to find a place for kids to ride their bicycles and families. So Alan, was there another question that you had asked?
Well, yeah, what's the first property you talked about?
Well, the first property, I don't know. Can I mention what property it is that we're talking about? Matt?
I don't think it's necessarily productive to talk about potential real estate purchases at a Trails Committee meeting. I think that's kind of getting off of the subject at hand, which is the trails that we have. But, that would be my opinion if I were providing guidance on that.
And then I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I know that when Don Clemens was here, Don said that potentially the property that was by Crabtree Park, there could be some trails around that. I don't know if that is accurate or not. Matt?
That was a plan that would be connected to some of the private lands and the wineries in that area. But I don't know if there was a plan for biking type trails or anything like that.
I was involved in that. It's a vineyard, and there was a discussion between the district and that vineyard about having trails. It's a steep property, and it's sort of off the table now.
Okay.
But to the committee, and to Matt's point about decisions being made, there was a turnover in the committee, there was a turnover in the board, there will be future turnovers in the board. And so just be aware of that past controversy. And yeah, fine, the decision's been made, and it's not up to you to challenge it, but it's up to you to be aware of it.
Any other questions for Alan? I have one more question for Matt. The survey that was done, what has the board done with that information? Have they put together any strategies as a result of that survey? It seemed like it was an overwhelming response for the community that they want trails, they're willing to pay for trails. What is the board doing with that information?
I think what we have right now with the trails master plan, the heritage trails plan, is there's a lot of future trail development at the Newberg Dundee bypass, improvements at Crystal Riley Park, other trails that are eventually going to be added to our current trails plan. Ewing Young Park, when we have eventual conditional approval to put a bridge over the creek there. So I think it's all been taken into account in terms of this larger future plan for our trail system. And then we also have a lot of existing trails. So there's two ways to look at what the Trails Committee can focus on, which is one, how we can improve the current trails we have, how we can add trails to the existing land we have, and then also priorities for some of our projects in the future. Of course, a lot of those have a lot of moving parts that may or may not be within our control as a district. Some may involve the county or the city or planning or potential purchases of new parkland in the future, like Jason alluded to. So I'd say it's been accounted for in that there's just a lot of moving parts, and we have the Newberg Dundee bypass trail would be the current project that is underway. So if there's what are we doing right now, that would be the current development.
Is there anything this committee can do towards that end of the Newberg bypass trail?
That would be something if we wanted to delve into where we're at on that and how the Trails Committee wants to interact with that project. I think that would be good to get staff at one of these future meetings specific to the project planning of that. We have hired a new temporary project planner who's working with Casey. It would be good to get one of them or both of them here to kind of give this committee an update, a detailed update as to where we're at now and which phase of the multiple phases we are completing now and where that leaves our trails. My understanding is when the current bridge is completed, part of that trail system will connect to existing trail systems that we have. That probably would be a really good discussion item, and that might be something in and of itself that could take up an entire committee meeting.
So my interpretation is you should talk to Casey about that.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah,
on
we
that?
definitely, we would need staff to really break down what's going on. The project planner, if he's available, we might have to plan him in advance, give him a month heads up of our future meeting, but he's taken over that project for now. Jim also, if we could get him to one of these meetings, he knows a lot about that.
And then we've got a new superintendent coming, so he or she is gonna be part of that as well.
Yeah, and I think on that note, I think it would be my suggestion that these committee members, if you don't already, try to attend the regular board meeting remotely or in person, because I think you'll find there's a lot of information and a lot of these projects are discussed.
That's a good point.
And it'll give you some good background. It's really helpful.
And they're all recorded, so you can always
And
watch
they're
them after the
recorded,
fact.
so you can
Go
watch the
back
recording
and
if you'd like also, right.
do as much digging as you want.
Yeah, so that'll give you a sense of the board priorities and where some of these projects are, because there's a pretty full agenda every meeting.
Well, Alan, thank you for sharing that with us, and thanks for your committee work. I think you guys accomplished a lot and moved the ball forward, and hopefully we can accomplish as much.
Hope so.
So, next on the agenda, Bob, you were going to give us a presentation on Wayfinding.
Well, I thank Ellen for giving me a segue into the presentation. I've felt for the last year that it's very important, particularly at Bob and Crystal Riley Park, that there's easy to use way to find your way around the park. And I'll go through it in the presentation. I base what I'm recommending around what I've seen at other parks that I found to be particularly easy to use. So I'll start off without taking any time. Does somebody have put up the presentation?
Richard should be.
Richard, do you have the presentation?
I have photos.
Okay.
Give me 1 second.
Bob, is the presentation that you wanted your old PowerPoint that you had in the past, or just the photos of what you guys have now?
It's a regular PowerPoint, a bit different from the one I presented a few months ago, but fairly short.
Okay, do you know where you sent that?
I sent
it to Kat.
Or
Yeah, Bob sent it to me and I sent it to Kat with the
It's-
agenda.
it's on the agenda for the meeting tonight.
Oh, okay.
On the online.
Yeah,
agenda.
Richard, if you're
Let me see
able
if I can find
to,
it.
I don't know if you're able to get that up for
Yeah,
them.
give me a couple seconds.
Yeah, Bob, if you want to provide a little bit of background, he'll probably have it up in a minute.
Alrighty. Well, we've lived basically fairly close to Bob and Crystal Riley Park for about 24 years. So we've really, just by being there a lot, have figured out where all the trails, go. I can empathize when I'm up there, usually 5 or 6 days a week. Almost every time I run into somebody that says, "Where should I walk?" And there is no easy way of telling them. If you're on the east side, there's absolutely no way of really describing it. If you're on the west side, the safest thing is to say, walk around the fields, but don't take those trails that go into the woods. Or I think you found out, Matt, they're a little bit difficult to negotiate back there. So the goal in this is just to make it a park where somebody who's never been here can come up with their family, with their kids, by themselves, and find their way around the park pretty painlessly. And even on an emergency basis, I'll go through in the proposal, a way of identifying where somebody is so that if emergency responders come, they also know exactly where that person is. Now there's really no way, unless you're lucky enough to have that emergency right on Parrot Mountain Road, of really telling them where to go. So I've just hiked and been in enough parks where we've just said, this is such a great, easy system. Can we incorporate things like this? State Parks has done some very good things with trail systems.
Are we talking about these?
Pardon me?
Are we talking about this? Oh, you can't see it. Hold on.
Yeah.
We see Matt.
This?
Oh,
No.
that's,
No.
that's my examples that I sent Richard earlier. Yeah.
Okay, I don't have it then.
It's on the page
He has to click
on the
link.
CPRD website. There is the presentation
You
on
have to
there.
click the link that Sarah sent.
On the page
Oh,
for this
on
meeting.
Yeah.
on the CPRD
Yeah.
website, the agenda.
The agenda for the Trails Committee does not contain that.
There's
Not
a
on the
presentation
agenda.
on there.
In the packet?
That's part of the packet.
See something.
Sign proposal?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, found that.
May I ask a question while IT is working on this for us? Thank you
Oh,
so
here we
much.
go.
Okay.
Quick question for Matt and Jason. Are there plans to name the trails in Bob and Crystal Riley?
Is that something you guys?
That would be a fantastic thing to discuss.
Okay.
I know that it's come up a couple times naming, trails, park benches. We've discussed, we had an employee, beloved employee up at Riley Park pass away, potentially naming something after him. But that's the sort of thing that, our board agendas have been very loaded and oftentimes intense too lately, especially with the superintendent search. So that would be a great thing if the committee has recommendations or thoughts on that, especially if they kind of play into this overall plan we have for uniform signage and trails, how we want to name trail names, trail sections, that kind of thing. I think that would be a great thing to provide a recommendation to the board on.
There are some names already,
Are-
which were put in place by the foundation.
Right.
Before, so I
Those,
don't know
those
how
signs that
sensitive.
are almost
There,
completely
yeah, you can't see a
disintegrated,
lot
yeah.
of them because they were like hand carved wood.
I've seen some of them hiking around there,
But
yeah.
just so everyone knows, and
What I'm
doesn't
actually,
mean we have to do this, but there was, I think people made donations in order to name those signs, those trails. So I don't know if that was for a specific term or whether we have to honor some of those names. It's only a handful, but just so we know, there are some names there.
well, if you can see that okay, I'll just start to go through this fairly quickly. I think we've already said that a needed addition is a easy-to-use signage system for Bob and Crystal Riley Park, and that it's pretty obvious from talking to people all the time that they have difficulty figuring out where to go. And it's a 327 acre park, so there's lots of, I think it turned out to be 13 or 14 miles of trails, so it's quite an extensive system. The trail mapping system I'll show you is one that we saw in particular up at a hike I've done a couple of times up in British Columbia, a place called Hidden Groves, which isn't really important, but it is, if you're interested, go to their website. They have a really good way of explaining that. But if you could go ahead and go to the next one. The next slide. Okay, so what I'm proposing is, and names can be incorporated in this, but I'm proposing a mapping system based on colors, just simply because it's really easy to follow. You can also incorporate names with that as well. But every trail had a color, pretty foolproof kind of system. The trails map both were at the entrance to the park, huge map, and the handouts had the same color-coded system on that. So very easy to see. They also would show on the trails map steep sections. So if you could have an idea of where you're going to be going, if it's something you want to tackle or don't want to tackle. But I have pictures to show you what is being described on the slide. So if you can flip to the next slide, please, that'd be great. So the basic system, I have pictures to go with this. At each intersection in the park, or where I was talking about, they have small map boards. Every intersection has a small map board. It shows you, if you want to get to this trail or that trail, how to do it. It also shows you how far it is. They used it in minutes. I would suggest doing it in distance, but it doesn't really matter on that. They just made it very simple. The other advantage of having that numbering system was when you got to an intersection, there was this small board, and it said number 34. So if there was an emergency, you can call 911 and said, we're at this park, we're at this intersection, number 34. They know where to go. It just simplifies the whole thing. That's a great picture of the big map board that they had at the park in BC, where just very easy to follow. They even showed, like with a little eye symbol, a viewpoint. There's all sorts of things that you can do to enhance it.
Bob, are those also at each intersection?
I'll show you. Go ahead and jump forward one more slide. So here's the intersection signs.
Okay.
And basically they're a smaller version of the big board, but it shows you enough where you can easily decide what trails you need if you want to head back, or if you want to see this viewpoint, how do you get there? Is it difficult? How long will it take me to do? But importantly, it's just that numbering system made it incredibly easy to follow along and see where you were. So They also did have a system with printed handouts. We never got them, and we had no problem in 2 visits there of finding our way and spending a good couple hours of hiking with absolutely no question of where are we. So if you can go to the next slide. This was the system they used, a little piece of rebar with a painted T-post topper. Simple, cheap. I had a meeting 2 weeks ago with Brian Stewart, and I was just so impressed that Brian had already done so much research on trail markers and things. He really was incredibly proactive on this. And he came up with a system that is similar to what the state park uses. It was like a plastic 3-foot tall, whatever you want to call it, stake. It's flexible, be put into the ground. There were various stickers that can go on this. There was color stickers, so you could put yellow trail and follow it along. There were stickers showing, if it was steep. All the things you want to get around, these stickers are available to put on these little signposts. And the good part is, if somebody should run into them, they bend, kind of thing, and they're not expensive to do. So that was one of the other. If you can move ahead one more slide.
How tall were those, Bob?
That's the last slide.
How tall was the rebar? I'm just curious.
That's pretty short, maybe a foot off the ground. And I like the 3 foot off the ground a lot better.
Yeah, that's yeah.
So if you can advance the slide, please.
That's the last slide.
Oh. Keep going back a little bit. Okay. Here's the current trail map. Down one, there. That's the current trail map. I know there's a lot of work that went into, I'm sure Alan could, as far as doing a full GIS mapping of every trail in the park, which was very impressive. However, if you take that map, you have absolutely no idea where you are. Absolutely none. So it's great, it looks pretty, but it doesn't really serve a useful purpose in terms of where am I going, how do I get back, etc. So I was going for, that's the reason I proposed this other system on that as well. So something that can be usable by by the different user groups, different ages, and make it enjoyable. What Brian also had suggested, I support completely, is getting volunteer groups to help do this project. You know, it's gonna take time to go out and put up these quite a few markers along 14 miles of trails,
I have a
particularly on the
question about
trails
that.
that are on the west side, back in the wooded area, which are pretty hard to follow sometimes.
Bob, are you proposing just using the markers with a color-coded system and not having a map showing where you are at each intersection?
No, both. Both.
Because the master called for 60, I think there's 65 intersections here.
Yeah, well, I don't know how many intersections we would have, but
So
that's one of the critical parts of knowing, here's where I am, and if I want to go here, here's how I go there.
is Brian moving forward with developing those intersection signs?
He's
That's
looking, I don't know what
complex.
progress he's made, but he's looking at the different ways of doing it. Obviously, there'd be signboards put up at the intersection, then a couple of large signboards, one in the farmhouse parking lot and one in the upper equestrian trailer parking lot. So people can just have an
something
overview.
maybe
of
this
what's-
committee could. So I notice, I hike at Young all the time and looking at their little map. It doesn't appear that the Park and Rec District has standards regarding signs. Like, if I don't have my reading glasses on, I can't even read their sign. And then we're looking at, we're working with equestrians on horsebacks and pedestrians. Is the same system, sign gonna work for both of those?
absolutely. You're really just mapping an area, whether your mode of transportation really doesn't affect
But as
that.
far as sign placement
Yeah.
and height and things, it can become challenging.
So Dennis, not Dennis, Richard, would you mind bringing up those photos that I had? And I think this was at MacGyver State Park, and I
Yes.
don't know if it's consistent, but I think these sort of symbols would be something that would apply to what Bob's saying. But I am concerned because in that email exchange today, it sounds like Brian already ordered.
I don't know,
Close.
I was hoping he would be here and
Okay.
we could get more information.
So that post on the left there, so that's for everybody that's using the trail and has all the different things you need to know as far as parking and where the trails are. And then periodically, there's these posts that are high. I mean, those named trails are probably 6 feet
Those
high.
For equestrians.
Yeah, and people, right, and big enough. And then we just took a picture of the parking lot entrance because there's a lot of confusion around the parking lots too. So as we talk about signage, we should also think about not just marking the trails, but making sure that there's, the ins and outs of how you get in the parking lot and generally where you park and things like that, because that seems to be kind of a sticking point also.
If you can lower the picture down, just in the center, that, I guess, plastic,
If you go down a
go
little bit
down
more.
one, to the upper, the picture above it. You missed one.
Maybe down a little
Sorry, I'm
bit.
doing updates right now,
There it
so
is.
it's lagging on my end.
Oh, no problem. The plastic post in the, you see there, the shorter one,
Yeah.
that is pretty similar to what Brian had showed
Yeah.
me pictures of. And you can put it comes with a whole variety of different stickers, colors, all sorts of information that can go on there.
I would just recommend that we wind up putting together these intersection signs first before we start installing the
Oh,
posts,
absolutely.
Because essentially
Otherwise,
with the
people-
intersection signs, they could work without the post. If you know where you are, you know if you're gonna go right or left, where it's gonna take you to the next intersection, then you're gonna know where you are
This-
there as well. So rather than just littering
Yeah, I don't think we need 60
bars with
maps
posts, so.
in the trails, yeah.
Maybe Brian at our next meeting could kind of update us on where we're at with that process and things like the size of font, all that stuff really,
course.
it's kind of critical to get it done right. And I'm not sure the district has done it much in that area yet, so maybe we can help with that.
It'd be great if it was consistent with the other district parks or state parks or something, so, because that's, I think, what people recognize, and it would be, we wouldn't be littering the park, right? It would be
Right.
something that,
Yeah. And whatever we do at Crystal,
Standard.
we should be able to do at
Yeah.
all the other parks, so they have a family resemblance and.
Could we also get from staff sort of their timeline for needs for our input, right? Because I know last time Brian said they've got financing for this year, fiscal year ends in June. He's already getting some things done, which is fabulous. So how can we help be productive and not be slowing him down or like being 3 steps behind him? So if he could maybe give us some deadlines about recommendations he would want from us, then we could really move things forward and be more of a partner than any sort of a
Yeah.
blocker to the work that they're doing.
That is
because
great.
if he's already ordered the post, then it sounds like we have the base of a system that we now need to work within, right?
Yeah, I'd like to add, I think if we have the system in place, whether it be color coding with with trail names or some sort of combination of both, if we have those in place and then we know what we need to order, what we need to purchase, what kind of new maps we need to print out. For example, Bob, you were showing that map. Well, if that was color coded and easier to read, it may make that map something where, okay, now we're ready to do some brochures or pamphlets, informational material, website, put up a big informational board at the park, maybe 2 of them, one at the farmhouse, one at the turnaround. And then if you all come to a consensus on what's needed and Brian agrees, then he can work on his job, which will come budget time, which is to put together, okay, I need two informational signs. I need these color-coded signs. I need enough brochures printed to distribute, that kind of thing. Then he can bring his budget request to the budget officer and then the budget committee and to the board. So that's kind of how it goes full circle. Then the board can see, oh, this is something we need to prioritize for 2025, so we can actually get these things done.
We need it by February, if you guys want it in this year. Okay?
It's tough. It's not gonna happen. Matt, do you know if the district has a graphic designer that they work on, if they have a contract with anyone, or?
We have one
I don't
in-house.
think we have an
In-house.
active contract. I know that Kat does all of the graphic work, and I think she has a few different vendors she works with.
Okay.
But I don't believe we have any active contract.
Okay.
I have a question for Bob. Thank you so much for doing this, but I love your idea about color-coded and the numbers. Do you have kind of idea how many numbers we need to use on these trails?
We won't know that until we actually
Go into it.
do a physical
Walking,
survey and walk
okay.
it, and then identify all the intersections.
Yep.
There's 65 intersections.
65?
Yeah.
65 intersections, so there's a lot.
65 intersection.
According to the master plan.
But the point of the color coding is just to make it, names can be added. I just think the colors are the most simplistic
Yep.
of systems.
I would like to add something. If you add, the direction, this is east, the north, the west, it would help me.
Yes.
I'm just so lost about, I'm going to the forest. I don't even know where the sun is.
They actually
Yeah.
did on the park from BC, they did say, you're facing north when you're looking at the
wonderful.
sign, or you're
Yeah.
facing south. So they actually did give you, I think, a really good amount of information to
Yeah.
know where you're going. And I really liked the part where they indicated steep sections.
I
So
love
if
that
you're
too.
maybe had young children, you might not want to do that section. Or where there were potential viewpoints, they indicated. So just things that are sort of easy to do without a lot of explanation.
We have a big enough map, you can take a cell phone picture of.
Exactly.
I do that all the time when I'm hiking.
Exactly.
Then I don't need to take more paper with me.
You should reach out to Quentin, our previous committee chair. I think he did some work on this, and he had a background in it. You should reach out to him.
You have his information though.
I might have his email, yes.
But anyway, thank you. It's just been a pet project I've had for about a year.
Bob, you
And I'm
should
sure
take
Brian, at our next meeting, will be able to give some updates, because he did do an order for signs. He just wasn't able to make the meeting tonight. He's at a conference.
Right.
Wasn't able to attend.
All right, any other questions for Bob?
When he gonna take us to BC, to the Hidden Grove? When are you gonna take us to BC for the Hidden
Well,
Groves
already
Trail?
we're planning a trip to a different part of BC next year, but I highly recommend anywhere in the Sunshine Coast,
Okay.
which is where it is.
All right, our next agenda item, I'm not sure we'll be able to talk much about it. We were going to hopefully have an update on possible field trip dates. We had talked at our last meeting that it'd be good for the committee to go out with staff and actually visit all the parks to get a broader holistic view of the trail system that we're being asked to work with. I can reach out to Brian just to remind him of that. We were going to look at maybe doing some kind of, what is it, monkey
a doodle poll.
A doodle poll.
Yep.
I like the word monkey too.
To do a doodle poll. I'm assuming we would want to do this on a weekend?
I believe from the last communication I saw between Kat, you, myself, maybe Brian was on it. Thank you. Brian was going to propose a couple times that worked within his schedule, and we were going to start there. So I think we're waiting to hear
Okay.
from Brian about what would be workable
So
for
we'll
him.
probably wait till our January date to firm that up.
And I'll message them both to follow up, so hopefully they can get an email out to the whole committee and start going over dates in the next week or two.
If anyone wants to explore Bob and Chris O'Reilly Park, Lauren's extremely familiar with it.
Not like you.
No, but I mean, please reach out to us. I'll be happy to take people out anytime. Definitely won't do all 14 miles in one go, but you can do different pieces of it.
We're on for Tuesday unless you're snowshoeing.
Unless I'm snowshoeing on Tuesday.
The next agenda item is meeting cadence, and what we mean by that is we're going to be meeting the second Tuesday of each month. Is that correct?
That's what's posted on the website, so I think
Okay.
if that's okay with the group.
Hopefully that works.
Matt, the board meetings are the last Tuesday,
Thursday? Board meetings are on Thursday, I think.
Thursdays. You're right.
Correct, yep.
The last Thursdays of each month.
Which means our next meeting is January
14?
14th.
Are we generally okay kind of having that posted that second Tuesday will be ongoing?
Stick with
Okay.
that. Sarah, you had a question on the master plan. Did you answer get your
No,
question?
no, but I can make it very quick.
Okay.
For Jason and Matt, I saw on prior agendas and on our committee part of the website that it said that the master plan was supposed to be approved by the board in June, but then I couldn't find any evidence that that was actually done. Where do y'all stand with the master plan for Riley?
Yeah, it was approved.
Okay.
My understanding is it's been updated to the website. But if it's not, we need to get it up there. I can follow up with Kat on that. Might be good to
Does the,
email that out or just email a link out to
does the
everyone on
county have to
committee.
adopt that at all?
No.
So you can develop whatever you want up there without?
Well, we're not building anything up there. Well, we will be building some horse stuff.
There are definitely restrictions up there. But my understanding is everything within the master plan was within the zoned use that's already in place.
So it's accepted as a park use.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, any ideas for agenda items for our January meeting? One we just talked about was what are Brian's needs and what we can do to help him meet those needs. Any
Just
other
one thing,
items?
Dennis, maybe start the discussion on how we're going to encourage volunteers to participate. You know, the methods will reach out. Are there existing groups we can talk to that are park users? Because that takes time to really put those things together, and the sooner we get started on that, I think, the more useful we'll
Can I
find
have
it.
30 seconds? I already did. I talked to Chamber of Commerce, so they were agreed to help out to volunteers, you know.
Great.
So, but we need to let them know in advance. And I think from there, we should get the word of mouth, especially with the director of Chamber of Commerce is very outgoing and will reach out to people.
Alan, in the past, did CPRD provide the equipment, or did individuals also provide some of the equipment to do some of the volunteer work of maybe cleaning or?
There was just one event, and I think people brought their own equipment, pruning shears and.
I got it. Chainsaw.
I think Matt Dalton would know better.
I volunteer. I think there were two. My husband did one on his own, and I went with him on another. as I recall, we brought our own gear, gloves, pruning shears, buckets, that kind of thing. I think there was a limited amount of resourcing provided, but the direction had been given. If you're going to come and you've got tools that you can bring, please bring your own.
I think Matt Dolphin's going to speak to your group next month, and he's a better resource than me.
Is that on the agenda then, or does that need?
Let's invite Matt, and maybe he can also talk about how they did the Trail Day event where they wound up getting 80 volunteers out for that day.
Yeah, I think there's a couple pieces to this. One, Brian will figure out exactly what the plan is, what he wants to get done, how many people he wants to recruit, and then the trail committee will assist in recruiting the volunteers, whether it be yourselves, people you know, connections with the chamber, or any other outside volunteer groups. And then we just work with Brian, and then he sets us up. It just depends on what we're doing. If we're clearing trails, that's a different process than potentially putting up signage or something like that. So I think we definitely want to put that on the agenda, and then Brian can come prepared with guidance on what's needed to get something like that going. But in the meantime, I'm sure reaching out to each of your networks, your extended networks, and getting some people excited about doing some volunteer days on the trail, I think would definitely help.
Yeah, I just feel like perhaps start that discussion, but it feels like we need a working session with Brian, and I think we had a subset committee member, or all the committee, about, to Matt's point earlier, like how many signs are we going to have? How many posts are we going to have? What are the signs going to say? What are we going to, like, we need the whole almost master plan of the signage before we have volunteers
It's quite
do
complex.
anything. And I would be worried about drumming up too much interest in volunteerism before we actually have things in hand and have the plan. And obviously we have to have better weather perhaps. So we may be
I think
a little far out.
Yeah, I think
volunteers yet?
I would target National Trail Day
Oh,
to have your big event.
which is that June?
June,
That's-
first
yeah.
weekend in June.
Yeah, that would be a great idea. I like that idea. But I just want to make sure that there's a lot of work to do, I think, figure out what it is that we're doing.
Yep.
Before we
Yep,
get everybody out there.
yep, a lot of design.
It'd be great. Yeah, a lot of design
Yeah,
and thought process, because, we want it to stand the test of time and accomplish what we've been talking about, which is be really clear and respect the environment and, recruit more people out there.
I will send out, say like the first of the year, I'll send out to all you folks asking for any other ideas on agenda items, and we draft something that Sarah and I can work on and get it out to you. So if anyone else have any other things for the good of the order? If not, then I would say the meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Good night.
Yeah, very thoughtful
Right.
discussion today. Very, very good, actually.
Do you think it's gonna be too much for me to ask?
Ellen?